Hello and welcome to episode 80 of the Page One podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us at the Page One podcast, where we'd like to speak to writers of all kinds about how they got into the industry, what the writing process is, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. This is the 80th episode, which is kind of a big landmark episode, Tarek.
Who would have thought we'd make it to 80 episodes?
Certainly not me. I'm sure we say this at every landmark episode.
We've another 5 episodes in the can.
We're still doing it. There's a big back catalogue of some really great authors, screenwriters, video game writers, comic writers. So do check out the back catalogue, but also stay and listen to this week's episode.
Oh, this week we have got a really exciting episode. We're chatting with Imran Mahmood, who has written a couple of books. His first one was You Don't Know Me. It was chosen by Simon Mayo as a BBC 2 Radio 2 Book Club choice, longlisted for the Theakston Crime Novel of the Year and the Gold Dagger Award. It's currently being adapted for screen. But his new book is I Know What I Saw, and it's just been out, I think, the last month or so, at time of recording. And it's a fantastic book about a homeless man who sees a murder and is not trusted or actually believed at all by the police when he reports it. It's a really good, twisty crime novel.
Mm-hmm. And Imran, of course, also has another career, full-time career, as a criminal barrister, which is kind of where he got the idea for writing his books in the first place. And we chat to him about that and how you balance, working a full-time difficult job like that with writing, and also he says he's got young kids. And he's working on lots of TV projects as well. I mean, as I ask him in the podcast, does he ever sleep? I don't think he can do.
It's funny, isn't it? Some people just seem to have to be able to manage all these strings, and I'm not sure I would manage one of them. But it's
no, exactly.
Pretty impressive.
Exactly. But we'll get straight into the interview after a quick advert for our Page One notebook about those notebooks, which are notebooks designed to help you plan and write your story. We're currently getting the second print run done, which is taking a bit longer than anticipated. But if you go to our website, you can register your interest and you'll get a discount on the books when they come out. But we'll play a quick advert for that, then we'll get into the interview, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's exciting guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because obviously you have a significant other career as well.
Well, the funny thing is, I always wanted to be a barrister, and then I started that, and it took up so much time, and it was a long time before I realised it didn't deliver everything it promised.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as I was doing that, I think I was always itchy for something else to do, and I used to write in between cases. I would write really terrible short stories, which nobody ever read. In fact, I think I gave one of them to a colleague in Chambers to read, and she would ask for them every now and then. She'd say, "Have you got none of these short stories?" And I'd give them to her, and she'd say, "They're really nice, but they're really depressing." Something else depressing. And so I just kind of gave up on that whole idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day, what happened was that I was writing a closing speech in a murder trial, and I had a really bright client. He was very clever. Young lad accused of murder in a gang, and I remember thinking, and he knew his case really well. He knew all the evidence. He knew what a weakness as well. And he was very, very involved in his defence. He would say, "Look, what about this? What about this? We thought about this." And so we had a pretty kind of continuous dialogue going on. And as I was writing his closing speech, I thought, "Oh God, what would it be like if I wasn't doing it, but he was doing it? What would his closing speech sound like?" Because it's really his message, and I'm just communicating the message in a way. I suppose that's a kind of the palatable form, for the judge, mm-hmm. for the jury, and all the rest of it. And so that's how that first novel, You Don't Know Me, was born. It was just me writing the speech that I thought a defendant might write. If he was faced with a crime and had to deliver his own speech, I thought, what would it sound like? And so I wrote that in between cases or waiting for cases to get on, and I finished the first draft, and I decided just as a punt, just to send it off to some agents to see, whether mm-hmm. it had legs, because what had happened a few years before was that I'd written a book. And I'd sent it. I think I sent it off as a kind of, let's just see what happens with it. Mm-hmm. And when I sent it off, I got almost nothing back. Zero interest. I think nearly nobody even replied to acknowledge that they'd received it. And I took it I would say I probably took it quite badly. Not. I don't mean that I was kind of incensed. I wasn't. I just kind of gave up a bit. Yeah. I'm just probably not very good at it. And I know other people don't react like this to setbacks, and they're the really successful people. The really successful people react in a positive way to setbacks, but that's not really me. And so I just kind of put my head down and ignored it. And then, as I say, many years later, I wrote this, and I sent it off to 5 agents, and they all came back really quickly, and they all said, "Send me the rest of it."
Wow!
And I thought. Yeah. Oh, we might be onto something. And then what happened was I met the first guy, and he said, "I really like this, but we would have to change it." And I said, "Yeah, I'm open to that. What would you change?" And he said, "Well, we'd have to change all of it." I said, "Oh, well, I didn't think I could do that because it took quite a long time to do." That's very well. But the second person I met was a woman who became my agent, Camilla, from Darley Anderson, and she read it and said, "Oh, I really love it. This is how I see it, and it's really good. It's really current." And I remember saying to her, "So what? Which bits will you have to change?" And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, presumably it all needs changing." She said, "No, we keep it as it is. Don't worry. Edits, but it's going to stay the same." And says, "Right, we're going to go with you."
Yeah, out of 2 options, I think that sounded like the better one. I always wonder about that with agents when, because other guests we've had on have said similar things sometimes, that the agent shows interest in taking them on, but then doesn't want the work that they've actually sent them. And it's a curious thing when everyone's trying to polish that thing that they try to send into the agent so much, and it might even not, it might not be that the agent is interested in. It must just be the voice or the way it's written that grabs the agent's attention.
Yeah, and for you don't know me, she said it was their voice. And the whole thing is kind of written, as a not quite a monologue, but has the feel that that it could be a monologue. And she said, it's it was the voice, the character, and so on that drove it. But I still have this relationship with Camilla where. She's a fantastic. The thing is, she's not just a great agent; she's a fantastic agent, and she champions you. And she does everything that you want an agent to do. She pushes, and she fights, and she's you want her on your side. She's brilliant, but she's also an amazing editor. And I still have this thing where I'll send her a manuscript in draft, and I've used this analogy before, and it's a bit like. The way I imagine it is, if she'd said to me, do a portrait, and I'd done one for her, and she looks at it and she says, oh, this is quite nice, but instead of the 5 eyes, can we have just and maybe lose a couple of the noses, and maybe let's have not 3 arms, let's stick to the 2. So it's a bit like that. And then when she sends it back to me, I think, oh God, yeah, you're right. I couldn't see it myself, how wrong it was in places. But she's very good at spotting that. So yeah, I think to that extent, where the agent doesn't want the thing that you've submitted, sometimes, it's for good reason. As they've seen the things that sometimes are too close to being able to see.
And it's funny because we've had a few writers who are or were lawyers on the podcast, and when I think about it now, I guess in a way there's a lot of being a lawyer, especially a court lawyer like yourself, is about telling stories. You're telling us your client's story to the judge or the sheriff or the jury, etc., and you're telling it in the best way that you can to put emphasis on the important parts as you see it, or what things that they should be paying attention to. And so I wonder if there's a natural link there of some sort between a lawyer and a writer.
Definitely. And in fact, when I was starting out, my pupil master, the person who personally trained me, pupil master.
They call them devil masters in Scotland, which is even more ridiculous.
We still have that term, deviling.
Yeah.
Like a devil's a devil outward. Actually, we're not allowed to call them pupil masters anymore. We are now pupil supervisors. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
Okay. big difference, big important difference.
But my pupil master said to me that you can tell the facts to a jury, and you can tell them your argument, but the only way you're going to get it to stick is if you tell it in a way that makes it stick. And the easiest way to do that is to tell them a story, or to make sure that whatever point you're making, you're delivering it as a story, because stories are memorable. And that's part of, because we are in the oral tradition, we give that speech orally, but part of that oral tradition is the telling of stories, and every culture does it. And the reason that the stories can be passed down the generations in that way is because they're memorable, and you can convey a message in a way which sticks. And you do that in a jury speech. And so yeah, there are those very direct parallels, I think.
And I wondered if there was also assistance from your legal career as well in terms of the way that you approach writing fiction. Do you? I imagine with a court case, you'll spend a lot of time looking at the detail, and in a jury speech, you'll think about the order of things that you want to tell the jury and things like that. Are you someone, when you write your fiction, that will plan it out in quite a bit of detail beforehand?
No, and in fact, I think it's a hindrance, because when I'm kind of getting the threads together for a jury speech, I'm usually aiming to do a speech which is no longer than about 20 or 30 minutes. Because any longer than that, and you lose their attention, particularly when they're concentrating, particularly if you're going straight after the prosecution speech. So they've already had their 30, 40 minutes of attention has been spent on them. So you've got to be quite concise. And so what I found was, when I was planning my novels, I'd have great material for 20 minutes worth of stuff. It would fizzle out, or I'd have a plot which would work nicely in a very, very, very short novella, but you couldn't really stretch it out over a novel. And so I found myself trying to eke out a very kind of tight plot over the course of 90,000 words. So that didn't work. So in the end, and I'm not a planner at all. I don't know. I once heard Lee Child saying this in a panel, and he said, "Oh well, I don't really like planning out novels because I don't want to know how it ends, because I won't carry on writing it if I know how it ends. I want to find out the ending as I'm going along, and I'm not quite that bad." It's just, I'm quite envious of people who can plot novels out in that way. I'm just not very good at it, and it's something. I think what happens is when I get the idea for a novel, I want to just kind of dive into it to see whether it works. Because sometimes you'd have a great idea, or an idea which I think is right, and then I'll start it, and about a week into it, I'll think, this isn't working.
Yeah,
that's not going to work because of whatever the character is that you've written. It just doesn't work for that. And I'll give an example. Was I wrote a character who was a psychopath or a sociopath, and the plot was great, but as I started writing him, I realised that you couldn't develop very much of a connection to him because he's a psychopath, and there is no kind of emotional bond that he's willing to create with you. And if you have a character like that, it kind of dies on the page. So yeah, sometimes you have to abandon stuff, and I think that's what I like to do, just trying it, see if it works, and then if it works, carry on a bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, I must lead to a lot of drafts then. Is that, do you do a lot of drafts until you're happy with I finally got a story I can write from A to B?
Yeah. So either I'm doing a lot of drafts or Camilla's doing a lot of drafts. Cutting out the additional ears and that sometimes happens. We'll look at it and we'll think, oh, this is. I remember once having a character who I based on somebody I knew very well, and Camilla said to me, "Look, this character is ridiculous. It's never going to work. Nobody will believe this person." And I said, "I know this person. He's an amazing one." Nobody's going to believe that this person exists. And this mate of mine, just by way of example, he wears actual rose-tinted spectacles, and will go to court wearing a cowboy hat, kind of a heel-length wax jacket and cowboy boots, and he's got kind of, I don't know what the appropriate term is for it, but he's got a beard which doesn't quite fully grow.
Yeah.
When you shave this bit.
Mutton chops.
Yeah.
I've got a different phrase for it, but I don't know what that's. And he's got mutton chops, and I said, and in fact, I think he might. There was a rumor that he had wooden teeth.
I can totally see why nobody would actually think this is a real person.
This is what he said. She said nobody's going to go for it. And I said, well, you should meet him because he turned up at his own wedding riding a horse. She said, no, we can't do that.
He's a lawyer.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
He's a talented lawyer, in fact. Yeah, very talented lawyer.
I do wonder what the clients must think when he first walks in the room, however.
When he rides in.
Yeah, exactly.
Some really love him. I mean, some don't get on that well with it, but some of them.
Yeah.
I suppose for some people, that's kind of what they expect. They want that drama.
Yeah. The theatre, all the
flamboyance. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you've sort of already mentioned that Camilla, your agent, will help you with the sort of editing of it, and it sounded like you're quite receptive to that. Do you ever get notes either from Camilla or from your editor at the publisher that you're not sure about or you want to push back on or anything like that?
For me, it's a question of trust. Now, I trust what Camilla says, and I would say 95% of the time I go with it because I look at it and I'll think, oh, that makes perfect sense or total sense to me. So, I usually find that she's right. And the same with the editor. My view has always been, look, people come to me for advice, and by and large, they take my advice because that's my area of expertise. And I hand over that area of expertise to the editors say, look, this is what they know best. And so, in fact, when they come to me and say, we're not happy with the title, we want to change it to I Know What I Saw, then I say, right. There's, because they're doing something more than just having a title which fits the book. They are saying, well, you know this, but they're saying, this is the kind of book it is, this is the kind of audience it wants, this is where the bookshops will place it, these are the bookshops that will buy it. They're doing a whole load of other things with the title that I can't do. And the same with designing the jacket. I don't really have much of a say in it, but I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. And I think you've got to trust the experts with chosen fields. Otherwise, there's no point having them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, your first book, You Don't Know Me, was really well received when it came out. It won. It was shortlisted for the Glass Bell Award, longlisted for the Crime Writers Association those Theakston Awards. It was chosen as a Radio 2 book club. Guardian had it as one of the best crime novels of the year. Lee Child, Tana French had accolades for it. I mean, that must have been a really, for your first book, what an amazing buzz that must have been.
Yeah, it was. It kind of blew me away. And it was happening. One thing was happening straight after the next. So my publicist would phone me up and say, "Hey, you're on Simon Mayo." And I go, "This is amazing. You've been shortlisted for this or that. Oh, your thing has been optioned TV." And it was literally one thing after the next, and it was a real kind of thrill. And it slightly ruined me for the. Sounds like it. Where are all the when am I going on Graham Norton? But yes, it was a real surprise, and it was particularly a surprise to have it optioned and then green lit. That was the thing. And it was only much later on that I realised, after speaking to a lot of other writers, that you can be optioned quite a lot, but getting green lit is pretty much as rare as his teeth. And so that's been as amazing as anything else to see the thing coming onto being filmed. And that's I was lucky enough to be invited along to the some of the shooting, and so you turn up at the studio and you meet these people who are the people that you've invented for the book, and you're meeting them, and it's bizarre. It's so strange. And then you listen to them saying words that you've written. Not all of them, because we've got a screenwriter who wrote better words than all. But some of them are mine. And some of the names are the same, and that was really surreal just to listen to that.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, did you have any involvement in the TV adaptation at all?
Yeah. So, well, not loads, but a little bit. So, what happened was that I was put in touch with Tom Edge, who wrote the screenplay, and he's super talented and very, very, very well regarded. And so, there's very little I can do to help him. But he would just phone me and say, "I'm trying to write this court scene. Is this the way to do it?" And he would show me his draft. And I occasionally would tweak it and say, "No, you wouldn't say that, you'd say that." But he's so sharp, and he got all the legal stuff really quickly, and often much more quickly than lawyers get it. He was just razor sharp. So that was an easy thing to do because it was him. Or the director, Sam Masood, would phone me and say, or would message me during the shoot and say, "Quick question. Does this judge have this kind of wig?" Or quick question, where will the witness stand, on the left or the right? So there was that kind of involvement. I wasn't writing the screenplay for that.
Is that something you'd like to do in the future at all?
Well, funnily enough, I was approached by the number of TV production companies to write to work on different projects. So one was lovely, talented woman called Nisha Pati, who said, "Have you got anything interesting? I'm thinking of doing some stuff, and I want to work with new writers. I'd like to work with you. Have you got any ideas?" And I said, "Oh, funnily enough, I've got this book which I haven't sent off for submission yet. It's kind of a comedy. It's kind of a young kids involved in criminality, involves gun, And she said, "Oh, I'm not really looking for comedy." I said, "Well, read it anyway." And she read it and she said, "Yeah, I'd quite like to make this. Will you write it?" And I said, "I don't know how to write a script." She said, "Well, give it a go. It's not that hard." So she was wrong about that. Well, she quite enjoyed it. In a way, it took a different discipline because you don't have 20 pages to develop a scene. Instead, in a line, you say deserted car park, smashed headlights, or whatever. Which is quite a nice discipline. Quite a nice way of kind of engaging the brain in a different way, but to the same end. And then someone else asked me to help develop a legal drama, so I've been working on that. And then I've got another project which is like a thriller. So yeah, so I'm doing a bit more of.
Awesome.
None of it's gone anywhere yet. I'm giving it a go.
I mean, how do you juggle this with the legal work as well?
Yeah, it's quite tough, and also I've got two young children. One's a baby who is a year old and isn't sleeping, and hasn't slept the whole of her life.
I feel your pain. Yeah.
Yeah. At the moment, I will scavenge whatever time I can. So sometimes when they're all asleep, I'll do some writing, or if I'm on a train on the way to court, I'll do some, or on the way back, or waiting for jury, or just whenever I can. If I've got some stuff, I'll do a bit of writing and just try and fit it all in.
And your latest book is I Know What I Saw, which has just come out this month. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what that book is about?
Okay, so the story is a kind of middle class man, highly educated, the Oxbridge guy, who comes from a family of academics, and he's geared up to have all of the privileges that life can give you. So he's been perfectly set up for a life of ease. But we meet him when he is homeless and more or less destitute, and he's beginning to fray. And he lives on the streets, and one day in London, it's raining heavily, and he's looking for shelter and pushes against a door which opens. It's a flat in Mayfair, and he goes in to dry off. And then as he goes into the flat, he thinks it's been abandoned or is empty, and then is just lying down there on the floor when he hears voices, and it's the occupants, residents returning. He hides, and as he hides, he's kind of trapped in his hiding place. He can't get out from behind the sofa because they're there. And he ends up witnessing one of the two people killing the other. And as he's there, kind of watching this in terror, frozen, and then afterwards he reports to the police, and nobody believes him. They don't believe him, partly because of who he is. He looks slightly mad. He's of no fixed abode. He seems like he could be, mentally unstable. And then also when they go and check it out, there is no dead body. Nobody seems to have been killed. Nothing he describes is as he's described it, and it's a kind of impossible crime. But yeah, so that's the kind of broad plot, and it kind of just gets worse. It goes along for him. It just gets harder and harder, and he finds himself in deeper and deeper trouble.
And it's written first person present tense, which, is that a deliberate choice? Often that, I think, can give a real sense of immediacy to a story, but sometimes with present tense, it can almost not read like a novel if it's not done in the right way. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, so I tried different versions of it, and what I wanted to do was create a sense of claustrophobia because I'm dealing. One of the things I wanted to deal with was this issue of identity and how it intersects with memory, and we walk around, live our lives, live our experiences. Our experiences feed who we are. and we become our experiences become us, and we're kind of enmeshed in this kind of tapestry. And I thought, when your memory starts to go, or if there's trauma to your memory, how does that affect who you become? How does it affect your personality? And the only way to really understand that for the character is to get very close to him. And I thought first person present gives you that sense of claustrophobia, so you're never really quite out of his head, and you're right behind his eyes in a way, so you can see what he's seeing and feel what he's feeling. And it seemed to work better in first person present than any of the other ways of doing it. But you're right, it's a challenge to get it to feel like a novel, and sometimes it can feel a bit exhausting, I suppose, if you write a novel in first person.
It also, I suppose, it can affect the structure of the plot, because you can only write what they know, if you see what I mean. If it was a more third person set back kind of narrative, then you can throw in different scenes to seed through the plot and stuff. So that in itself brings its own challenges, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I don't mind that so much, because I quite like this idea of experiential stories, so that if you're telling the story as you observe it, and you see life as you observe it, and you're relaying it, I quite like that anecdotal feel about the story. And when you've got kind of omniscient third person rather than close third person, it can sometimes feel a bit like, I don't know. I mean, when it's done well, it's fabulous, and when anything's done well, it's fabulous. But there is this kind of slight Deus ex machina quality that anything can happen, and you can pull a fact out of nowhere in a way, because your character doesn't have to appreciate that something's happened. You can put everything in the background.
Yeah.
So we in an oral tradition, you're telling stories about things that's happened to you, and I find those interesting. Those stories where somebody says, "Oh God, I was in court yesterday, and you'll never believe what happened," and then they'll tell you this story, and it doesn't need everybody else's perspective. You can get a sense. I'll give you an example if you want. I was years ago. Somebody told me this story about how he was in the magistrate's court and his defendant was being sentenced, and you've got to fill out a means form, which is how much you earn. So he said to the defendant, "Have you done a means form?" And he says, "Yes." He says, "Well, can you give it to us?" And he was like, "Oh, I haven't finished yet. Have you got any sellotape?" So he says, "Go and get some sellotape." "What do you need sellotape for?" He says, "Well, I just need some sellotape." So they fuss around getting him some sellotape. So he's ripping it up, and he's kind of hiding it, and nobody knows. And then eventually, and the form comes in, kind of, it's folded in three, and he hands it up. Prosecutor takes it. He goes, "It's not for you. It's not for you to look at. That goes straight to the magistrates." And there were 3 magistrates. That goes straight. And the prosecutor pulls it, and he gives it to the clerk, and the clerk looks at it. He goes, "It's not for you." He looked at it, and she says to me, "I think you've got to see this," as he's telling it. In the first person. So he looked at it, and he says, "I opened it, and it had 3 £5 notes sellotaped." As if it was a bribe.
Oh dear.
And that's got everything a story needs. I think it's all from one person's point of view, and you can work all the motivations and the reactions of everybody else from that. And I don't know, I quite like that way of telling a story. I think
it's interesting. You get I think a lot of Stephen King novels, Stand and stuff like that, are told in that kind of really high up third person, where it's almost like he's telling you a story, and he's like, "And there's this person, this is their background, and this person," and it's almost like he's in the room with you, and he's in all their heads, and he does a very good job of that. But I feel a lot of other people that agree when it's like that, it doesn't quite work as well for me. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think there's something about limiting yourself, or limiting the reader's ability to be in everyone's head, and to leave that kind of, either leave a mystery or let them fill in the blanks themselves. Because as you say, it's often it's with between the lines. You don't need to spell out everything to get it, and folk can make the assumptions and the jumps, without any real trouble.
Yeah, and we all live this individual experience anyway, so we don't always have all the information. We just have the information.
Yeah, true.
And you're right, when it's done in that way, where it's particularly if you've got dialogue between two people and they don't do it right, and they switch point of view, between the two, you're kind of seasick. But
totally.
And what they're feeling, and if it's not done correctly, it can be a bit dizzying.
And is it important when you write your novels that they explore, a theme or have a message of some sort in them? Do you want, more than just a simple story? You want to explore something in the telling of it as well?
Yeah. I've always thought that for me, if I don't tell that, well, for me, the real story is the big theme. So if it's morality, or it's justice, or it's equality, or racism, or diversity, or memory and identity. Those are actually the stories I want to tell, and yet I'm delivering it through the medium of a crime story. But the crime story is really just the cover, to sneak in the other story that I really tell. Because I'm not really a good enough literary writer to do it in the ordinary literary way. So I have to do it through the medium of this. I quite like the idea of telling this story, but sneaking another story in alongside it, because otherwise for me it'd be a wasted or missed opportunity, I think, because you've got your captive audience there in your hands, and it's your opportunity to tell the story that you want to tell. And people don't always respond well to being told stuff and to be told how to feel about some big issue. But if you can tell it in a story, and you can change people's perceptions and their views and how they feel about something, then that's quite powerful too. I remember reading To Kill a Mockingbird and remembering how powerful that message was being delivered. And it's delivered through scout a 9-year-old child, and she's not intending to shove a message down your throat, but it's done so beautifully that it would have been a terrible shame if that opportunity had been missed just for the telling of a different story.
Mm-hmm. And there was a phrase I saw you use, I think it was an interview with The Guardian, and you talked about putting the moral argument against legal guilt. And I wondered what you meant by that exactly.
So, for me, the law has always tried to represent the kind of moral values of a society. So we develop our laws so that they match as far as possible what we feel is reprehensible conduct. So theft, murder, and so on. But the law can't cater for every bit of morality and for every moral situation. It tries to, but it can't. So by way of example, the law says you can't kill someone, and they'll punish you if you do. But the law does not say that you have to intervene to save someone's life. So if you see somebody drowning in 6 inches of water, you don't have a criminal responsibility to save them. You can let them die. But there's still the moral question. And the moral question isn't always the same as the legal question. So morally, yes, it would be reprehensible for you not to save that person, particularly if it's at no risk to yourself. And I always thought that question was interesting. And also there are some kind of legal wrongs which aren't necessarily commensurate with immorality. So, you'll have people who have, to take the obvious example, steal a loaf of bread to feed your family has a kind of moral weight to it, but is still illegal. Or, those cases where somebody has killed someone in defending their own homes. Where does the moral line? How does it blur the legal ones? I've always thought that's an interesting question because the one system is designed to cater for the other. The legal system is designed to cater for our moral needs as well as to provide law and order.
Yeah. I mean, I think, just going back to what you were saying as well before about using a story to deliver these things, it's a way of, as you said, reaching a wider audience. You can explore these things in a way that someone might not pick up a textbook that was saying the same thing, but you can reach a much wider audience and still get them to think about these themes or these arguments as well.
Yeah. For example, not everybody's going to come across a young black man who is living on an estate and is surrounded by kind of criminal gangs.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an experience everybody in the world is going to have. Or a homeless person. You'll see them, but will you always interact with them? So it's a good way of bringing an experience to an audience which might never have experienced it. And then that meeting of that virtual person becomes almost as valuable as meeting a real person, because it starts to give you an insight into their thoughts and their behaviors and their motivations, and you get to experience it from a place of safety. So you don't have to, if you're frightened, to go and speak to somebody who's got a gun in his hand, or if you're embarrassed, speak to somebody who's living in a cardboard box. It'd be nice if we could all the time, but the reality is that we won't. Mm-hmm. But we can explore the issues from a position of relative safety. We can try and understand some of the pressures and try and understand some of the context. And I think it's a good way of doing that, at least.
Does that add a sense of responsibility when you're writing about these sorts of themes as well? I mean, do you obviously in your work that'll give you a lot of experience, but do you spend time researching things that you're wanting to explore in your novels as well?
I think the responsibility is to do it with as much sensitivity as you can. Try and make it as authentic as you can. But that's as much as you can do, when it comes to character. And then, so far as the message is concerned, make sure that you try and deliver that in as balanced a way as possible, because ultimately you're not lecturing, you're just explaining. And I'm not saying, being in a gang is an awful thing or murder is an awful thing. I'm saying these are the competing arguments. You decide for yourself how you feel about it, but you might get a sense of how the writer feels about it. That's fine, because everybody has a point of view.
Yeah.
And it would be unusual if the writer didn't have a point of view as well. But, take it all in and reach your own decision. And remember that people aren't always, when they're telling the stories, they aren't always reliable. You can't always trust somebody. You trust some of what people say. You can't always trust everything that people say.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's looking forward? What's your plan then? Are you wanting to continue the day job? Are you wanting to hang that up and just write full time?
No. I for the moment, I'd like to do both for as long as I can.
Yeah.
And the day job's in a way useful because it brings you into contact with 100 different people from different backgrounds, from different places, living different lives that I otherwise would never have the privilege of meeting. One day I'll meet a millionaire stockbroker who's involved in a potential fraud, and that's an interesting person to meet. Mm-hmm. He's as interesting as the guy I met a couple of weeks ago, who is 6'5", 20 stone, and a burglar, an alleged burglar, and he's interesting because I went, how do you burgle something when you? I thought burglars were, most of the burglars I'd met were kind of small and wiry. And
surely what he said was, I don't.
He had he'd had more convictions.
All right. Okay.
I'd ever met. Some 38 or something.
Wow.
Sounds like he's obviously not a very good burglar.
Well, that was the answer he gave. He went, well, that's why I keep getting called.
So you've said you're working on these various projects. Is one of those projects the next book as well?
Yeah, so I've just handed in the first draft of the next book to my editor, so I'm keeping my fingers. And that's always slightly tense because you don't know until they've read it what they think of it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have a clue about what they think of it unless you've delivered it in stages.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a kind of old-fashioned novel. Episodes.
Do you have to give them sort of a pitch for it at all, or is it entirely fresh when they get it?
Oh, so with this one, what happened was I had already started writing it when we were talking to them about a contract for 2 books. So the way they did this one was that they said, we're happy to offer it on a partial, so show us what you've got. And so I'd had whatever it was, 20,000 words, which I showed them, and they looked at it and said, yeah, we're happy to offer on that. But the next one will be on a pitch, so I'll have to.
Right.
This is the idea for it. These are the characters. I might give them a couple of chapters and say, this is the tone of it, this is how it will read, this is the point of view, this is the scheme I'll use. What do you make of it? And they might say brilliant, and they might say not really for us, because they're also concerned with other things like branding.
Mm-hmm.
You're unaware of when you start. When I started, I fully expected to have written the book, give them the book, and then just go home. And I didn't realise that they want you there the whole time. They want you there for each of the edits. And I thought, well, you're the editor, aren't you supposed to do the editor? But I literally thought they would do all of the edits for me, not just tell me what needed to be changed. But no, that's me. The copy edits and the proof edit and all of that. And then they say things like, oh, we want to kind of be with you and help you throughout the whole of your writing career. And at that point, I remember thinking, I had no idea that I was doing a writing career. I thought I was just delivering one book and selling it to you in much the same way as I'd sell you, a bit of furniture. Mm-hmm. If I made furniture, I thought that was the end of the arrangement. But no, they want you, if they can, for as long as possible, which is not a lovely thing if you're a writer, that they do. I can't remember what the question was, but the answer's probably not in there.
It was about pitching, whether you had to pitch the story. But when is the You Don't Know Me show out? Is there a date for that yet? Oh.
So it's been filmed. It is, as I keep saying, it's in the can. And the director keeps kind of cringing whenever I say it. It's never a phrase that they've ever used. But yeah, it's in the can, as they don't say in the industry. And I'm told that no one knows when it's being screened because it's a dark art.
All right.
Apparently scheduling is a really dark art, and not even the commissioners know when the schedulers have got it slated for. And that's because they need to know what channel is doing what.
Right.
Is it compete with that, and do we want to be next to Holby City, or is it Coronation, or whatever the show is? So there's all of that going on. But we think, doing the best we can, that it's going to be sometime next year.
Excellent.
Which is precise, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we'll look forward to that whenever that date appears. What was the last book that you read?
So I usually end up reading 2 or 3 of them at the same time. So can I give you a few that I've
Absolutely.
That's fair.
So I read a great book by Jason Mott called, and it's a hell of a book, and it's called Hell of a Book.
Okay.
It's brilliant. If you get a chance to read it, it's fantastic. And it's about an author who writes a book called Hell of a Book. And he's on a book tour around the States. But there's fabulous commentary on everything that's going on in America right now. And it starts with this character who is a black writer, and he's going on this tour, and he keeps seeing this kid, and he's a young black kid, and he sees him, he turns up everywhere, and he's the kind of blackest kid he's ever seen in his life, almost as if he's absorbed all of the light from the room. And he keeps seeing him, and it's just this. It's a gorgeous book. If you get a chance to read it, it's brilliant. I finished reading The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward, which is a kind of gothic horror, but not a gothic horror. It's, again, pretty sublime. I'm in the middle of reading Steve Kavanagh's new one, which is, as all of his books are, it's brilliant, spectacular book. Hits every nail on the head as he goes through it. It's just, he's an expert at those things. I'm reading Vaseem Khan's new one, which is called A Dying Day. Also brilliant. I mean, if you like cozy crime, I don't think anybody in the country does it better than him right now. So that's. I've been reading Erin Kelly's book, Last One to Fall, I think it's called. I'll get that right. but it's also fantastic. It's about the ballet world, but she writes so beautifully.
I mean, do you ever sleep? No, clearly not.
I try and use the book before. So the one book I'm reading, which I'm reading to fall asleep to, is called The Leopard by Giuseppe Lampudeso.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so cheesy. I mean, it probably says more about me than it does about the book. I find it really, really difficult.
But it sends you off to sleep, so it serves its purpose at least.
Yeah, a couple of sleep.
And what about the last film that you've watched?
Oh. I don't tend to watch films. I tend to watch things on Netflix in 5 parts or 6 parts. And I watched The Mayor of Easttown.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's excellent, yeah.
Amazing. Obviously, it helps that it's got her in it because
she's fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, she's just incredible. I mean, the Titanic started her off, and then she's been getting better and better since. And there's script in there. It seems to be.
Yeah, my wife and I sat down to watch a couple of episodes and ended up binging all 7 episodes in one night. It was
staggering, isn't it? So good.
Yeah.
Last film I watched, I think was called. It might not be called this. Fatherhood or Parenthood, and it's got. This is how good I am. It's got a comedian in it, and it's on Netflix. And the comedian is probably the most famous comedian in the world.
It's not the old Steve Martin Parenthood film, no.
No, it's not. It's a new film.
Right.
Let me have it. Let me just. I've just watched that. It's very good. It's found it. It's got Kevin Hart in it. There you go.
Okay.
The most famous comedian. And it's called Fatherhood, and it's on Netflix. And it's an easy watch. It's not terribly taxing, but nice, comfortable watch.
Excellent.
Nice.
If you're looking for something highbrow, that's not really film.
And the very, very last thing we always do is a quick fire, either or. So there's no right answers apart from one. And the first one's going to be Atticus Finch or Perry Mason.
Atticus Finch, all day long. All day long.
TV or cinema?
Ooh, today TV.
Yes. Night owl or early bird?
A night owl.
Fancy restaurant or takeaway?
Ooh, I miss the fancy restaurants. I haven't been to one. Oh, yeah, fancy restaurant.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
Real book. Real book.
Another wrong answer. I'm not doing very well in this one. I've had a lot.
Tarek asks everyone this, and I think about 3 people have said ebook.
Not having a lot of support recently in the old ebook camp. We're starting to starve out here, I think.
You're just wrong.
Oh, that was a really fun chat. I really enjoyed that, and some really great examples, I think, of choosing just enough stuff from your real life job or what you see around you and putting into a novel. It's a great place to find the character.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, it's inspired him in terms of his ideas, but obviously, the characters you meet in a job like that are obviously going to be very varied and give you a lot of rich seam of stuff to draw from. But as he said, sometimes even the real characters are too ridiculous to put in the book. I'm not sure.
A wax jacket.
Yeah, the rose tinted glasses, and I'm not sure I would want that as that sort of person as my defense lawyer.
I think if you turned up, I'd be like, I did it. Send me to jail.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm sure he's a very good lawyer.
I'm sure he is. Going to get sued.
Exactly.
Probably should be slagging off lawyers.
Exactly. Well, thanks very much to Imran for coming on to the podcast. We really enjoyed that, and his book, I Know I Saw, is out. It's got a lot of buzz about it, so you can go and pick that up in your local bookshop or pick it up online. We'll put a link in the podcast description so that you can grab that. But we've got another great guest next week.
Yeah, it's a really, really fun chat next week. One I was very excited with, Mr. C. Robert Cargill, who is perhaps best known for his screenplay work. He's written movies such as Sinister and its sequel, and Doctor Strange. That was kind of the first time I kind of got to know him. And he's written a whole bunch of stuff. He's got The Black Phone coming up soon, which is an adaptation of Joe Hill's short story. And yeah, it's a really fun chat with him. He's written a number of books. Sea of Rust is the big one he's done recently. And its recent sequel,
Sea of Rust
Day Zero.
And Day Zero, which is a prequel.
Prequel, sorry.
It's a really interesting chat. And for those that don't know, Cargill, as he likes to call himself.
Cargill, yes. Yeah.
He started out as a film reviewer for the, at the time, very famous Ain't It Cool News website. And from there, sort of got into screenwriting, which is, a dream path, really. And then from there has gone on to write some really great novels as well. So it's a really interesting chat and, really getting behind the curtain on some of the Hollywood industry and, what it's like to work with Marvel and things like that. So, do tune in for that episode. It's really good fun.
And of course, if anyone has any questions or comments, they can always get in touch with us by sending us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk or a tweet.
Please don't send us a tweet.
Don't send us a tweet. A tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @right_gear.
And if you enjoyed the episode, please do take time to give us a quick rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you listen to. That would be really helpful to help us stay in the charts. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @UKPage1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.